Hey guys! Tonight, you're not learning about Laura Ingalls Wilder, the beloved author who captured America's heart with tales of prairie courage and pioneer grit. You're not hearing about the handsome Almanzo Wilder, the farmer boy who saved a starving town and won Laura's love. You're not stepping into the warm glow of a children's book where hard work always wins and good people triumph. You're standing in a cramped schoolroom in Dakota Territory on a frozen morning in January 1883. The air is so cold that your breath hangs like fog. The wood stove in the corner barely fights off the chill creeping through the gaps in the walls. 23 pairs of eyes watch you. Most of them are children. Some of them are nearly grown, and one of them is a 15-year-old girl named Laura Ingalls who is waiting for you to fail. Her name is Eliza Jane Wilder. She's 32 years old. She's unmarried. She's educated beyond what most frontier women will ever achieve. She's standing at the front of this classroom trying to teach arithmetic to children who would rather fight than learn. And in 60 years, she will be immortalized as a fool. You need to understand something before we go further. This is not a story about a bad teacher. This is a story about how personal grudges become historical truth. This is about what happens when the person who writes the story hates you. And this is about a woman who did something extraordinary that history has almost completely forgotten. Eliza Jane Wilder filed a homestead claim. Alone. She broke sod, built a shanty, planted crops, and proved up 160 acres of Dakota Prairie without a husband, without a father's money, and without asking permission from anyone. She was one of nearly 200,000 single women who claimed land under the Homestead Act. But unlike most of them, Eliza Jane made one fatal mistake. She became the sister-in-law of a woman who would write books that millions of children would read. The schoolroom smells like wet wool and wood smoke. The children shift in their seats. The boys in the back row are whispering. You know they are planning something. You have been teaching long enough to recognize the signs, the quick glances, the smothered laughter, the way their hands move beneath their desks. You clear your throat. You call for attention. Your voice is firm. You have taught in Minnesota, in Iowa, in settlements where the children were just as wild. You know how to command a room. But today, something is different. Today, the defiance feels personal. Laura Ingalls sits 3 rows back. She is small for 15. Her face is serious. Her eyes are sharp. She does not whisper with the other students. She simply watches. And somehow, that is worse than the boys' rebellion. Because Laura is not planning mischief. She's taking notes. Mental notes. Notes that will one day become a book called Little Town on the Prairie, where you will be portrayed as incompetent, pretentious, and ridiculous. You do not know this yet. You do not know that history is being written in real time by a teenager who has already decided you are the enemy. The morning drags. You assign arithmetic problems. The older boys refuse to work. You threaten to keep them after school. They laugh. One of them, Cap Garland, leans back in his chair and grins. Another boy makes a joke you cannot quite hear. The younger children giggle. You feel control slipping. This is the moment that will define you in literature. This is the scene Laura will describe in painstaking, humiliating detail. Miss Wilder loses control of the classroom. Miss Wilder cannot discipline the boys. Miss Wilder is a failure. But what Laura will not write is what you are actually thinking. You're thinking about the homestead claim you filed 2 years ago. You're thinking about the sod shanty you built with your own hands, with help from your brothers Royal and Almanzo. You're thinking about the crops you planted last spring that the drought killed. You're thinking about the fact that teaching is the only way you can earn money to survive the winters while you prove up your land. You're thinking that you are exhausted. The Homestead Act promised free land to anyone willing to work for it. The law did not care if you were male or female, married or single. If you were 21 years old and willing to live on 160 acres for 5 years, the land was yours. It sounded simple. It sounded like freedom. It was a lie. Not because the government broke its promise. The land was real. The claims were honoured. Women who proved up their homesteads received legal titles just like men. But what the Homestead Act did not tell you was that free land requires capital. It requires lumber for building. It requires seed for planting. It requires horses or oxen for breaking sod. It requires tools, nails, glass for windows, and food to last through winters when nothing grows. Free land costs everything you have. And if you're a single woman with no family money, it costs even more. You took this teaching job because you needed it. The pay is $30 a month. That is enough to buy lumber for repairs, seed for spring planting, and food to supplement what you can grow. But teaching while homesteading is like trying to run two directions at once. The children need you during the day. The land needs you every other hour, and there are never enough hours. The bell rings for noon recess. The children explode from their seats and flood toward the door. Laura Ingalls walks past you without speaking. Her face is carefully blank. You wonder what she is thinking. You will never know, because Laura will never tell you. She will wait 58 years, until you're dead and buried in Louisiana, before she publishes the story of the teacher she despised. You are Eliza Jane Wilder, and you're standing on 160 acres of Dakota Prairie in the summer of 1881. The grass reaches your waist. The sky is enormous. The wind never stops. You're holding a surveyor's map that shows the boundaries of your claim. Section 12, Township 110 North, Range 56 West. The numbers mean nothing to most people. To you, they mean everything. This land is yours, not your father's, not your brother's, not a husband's, yours. You walked into the land office in Brookings County 3 months ago. You paid the filing fee of $18. You signed the paperwork. The clerk barely looked at you. He had processed dozens of claims that week. Half of them were women, single women, widows, divorced women. Women who understood that land ownership was the only path to security in a world that offered them almost nothing. The Homestead Act was signed in 1862 by President Abraham Lincoln. It was designed to populate the western territories with settlers who would transform wilderness into farmland. The law was shockingly progressive for its time. It did not restrict claims by gender. A woman over 21 or a woman who was the head of a household could file a claim exactly the same as any man. This was not generosity. This was pragmatism. The government needed bodies on the land. They needed people willing to suffer through droughts, blizzards, grasshoppers, isolation, and the brutal labour of breaking virgin prairie. Gender was irrelevant as long as you could survive, and women survived. They survived at higher rates than men. Studies would later show that women homesteaders had a success rate of 42% compared to 37% for men. Women were more likely to stay. They were more likely to prove up their claims. They were less likely to abandon their land when the work became unbearable. You are part of this pattern, though you do not know it yet. You look at the land stretching before you. It looks empty. It looks peaceful. It looks like freedom. What you cannot see is what happened here 3 years ago. This land belonged to the Dakota Sioux until the United States Army forced them onto reservations. The prairie you're standing on was hunting ground, sacred space, home. The government surveyed it, divided it into neat squares, and declared it available for settlement. You're not thinking about this. No one thinks about this. The land is open. The land is yours. That is all that matters. You begin planning. A claim shanty must be built first. The law requires residence. You must live on the land for 5 years to prove your claim. The shanty does not need to be large. 8 feet by 10 feet is enough. Just 4 walls, a roof, a door, and a window. You will hire men to help with the construction. Your brother Almanzo will assist, so will Royal. This is how families survive on the frontier. You work together, you share labour, you help each other prove up claims so the family holdings expand. By the end of summer, the shanty is finished. It is small, it is drafty, it smells like fresh-cut lumber and tar paper, but it is yours. You move in with a trunk of clothes, a small stove, a table, a chair, and a bed. You hang a curtain across the single window. You stack your books on a shelf made from scrap wood. You are home. The work begins immediately. Breaking sod is the hardest part. Prairie grass has roots that go down 6 feet. The The roots weave together like iron cables. A regular plough cannot cut them. You need a breaking plough pulled by oxen or heavy horses. You need strength. You need help. You hire a man with a team to break 5 acres. The cost is steep. $3 per acre, $15 total. That is half a month's teaching wages. But without broken sod, you cannot plant crops. Without crops, you cannot prove improvement. Without improvement, the land office will not grant you final title. The plough cuts through the earth with a sound like tearing fabric. The sod comes up in thick strips. The smell is overwhelming, rich, rotten, ancient. You're cutting into soil that has never been touched by metal. You're destroying an ecosystem that took thousands of years to develop. The prairie will never recover from this, but you do not think of it that way. You think of it as progress. You plant wheat, you plant oats, you plant a small garden near the shanty with potatoes, beans and squash. You water the plants by hand, carrying buckets from a creek half a mile away. Your back aches, your hands blister. By the end of the first summer, your skin is burned dark by the sun and your arms are lean with muscle. You're becoming something you were not before. You're becoming a homesteader, but you're also still a teacher, and teaching is the only way you can afford to keep the claim alive. So when the DeSmet School Board offers you a position for the winter term of 1882, you accept. $30 a month, 3 months of work, $90 total. Enough to buy seed for spring, enough to repair the shanty roof, enough to survive. You do not know that accepting this job will destroy your reputation for the next 140 years. You are Eliza Jane Wilder, and you are the 3rd child of James and Angeline Wilder, born December 1st, 1850 in Malone, New York. Your father is a farmer. Your mother is known for her skill with butter and cheese. Your family is respectable, not wealthy but solid. You grow up in a house where hard work is expected and education is valued. You have 2 older siblings, Laura Ann, your sister, and Royal Gould, your brother. After you come Alice, then Almanzo, then Pearlie. 6 children in total. You are the oldest daughter for 7 years before Alice arrives. This means you help raise the younger ones. You change Almanzo's diapers. You teach him to walk. You scold him when he misbehaves. He is 7 years younger than you. This age gap matters. It shapes everything. Almanzo grows up thinking of you as a second mother. You grow up thinking of him as a child you helped raise. Even when he is fully grown, even when he is 25 and courting a girl, you still see the little boy who cried when he skinned his knee. You still feel responsible for him. You still think you know what is best for him. This will cause problems. The Wilder family moves west in the 1870s. Your father sells the New York farm and relocates to Spring Valley, Minnesota. The land is cheaper. The opportunities are better. Royal and Almanzo strike out on their own, working as farmers and stock traders. You begin teaching school. This is one of the few respectable occupations available to unmarried women. It requires education but little capital. It offers independence. It pays poorly, but it pays. By 1879, you are 29 years old and unmarried. This is not unusual. 10 to 15% of women in your generation will never marry. Some by choice, some by circumstance. Teaching creates a cohort of career single women. You are one of them. You're also opinionated. Your family describes you as having a nervous temperament. This is code. It means you express your thoughts. It means you do not defer quietly to men. It means you have expectations and you voice them when those expectations are not met. In the 19th century, this makes you difficult. In the 21st century, this would make you normal. When your brothers head to Dakota Territory in 1879, you follow. Royal stakes a claim near the new town of DeSmet. Almanzo does the same. You see opportunity. You see cheap land. You see the chance to own something that cannot be taken away. You file your claim in 1881. The Ingalls family arrives in DeSmet in the fall of 1879. Charles Ingalls is 43 years old and still searching for success. He has moved his family across the Midwest for 15 years. Wisconsin, Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, back to Minnesota. Now, Dakota Territory. He works for the railroad. He files a homestead claim. He builds a shanty. He tells his wife Caroline that this time, this place, will be different. It will not be different. The Ingalls family will struggle in Dakota exactly as they struggled everywhere else. But they will stay, and their daughter Laura will write books that make the struggle sound noble. Laura Elizabeth Ingalls is 12 years old when her family arrives in DeSmet. She's small, dark-haired, quick-tempered, and fiercely intelligent. She adores her father. She's protective of her older sister Mary, who went blind from scarlet fever. She resents poverty. She resents the fact that her family is always on the edge of failure while other families prosper. She meets Almanzo Wilder during the hard winter of 1880 to 1881. This winter is a crucible. Blizzards begin in October and do not stop until May. The town is cut off from supply trains for months. People burn furniture to stay warm. They grind wheat in coffee mills to make bread. They come close to starvation. Almanzo and a young man named Cap Garland make a dangerous trip south to buy wheat from a farmer who has a hidden supply. They risk freezing to death. They save the town. Almanzo becomes a hero. Laura is 13 years old when this happens. She watches. She remembers. And when Almanzo begins courting her 3 years later, she already sees him as someone brave, capable, and strong. You do not see him this way. You see him as your little brother. You see him as someone who needs guidance. And when he begins spending time with Laura Ingalls, you have opinions. Laura is too young. She is 15 when the courtship begins. Almanzo is 25, 10 years difference. This is not scandalous by the standards of the time, but it is notable. Laura is also poor. The Ingalls family has nothing. No land, no money, no prospects. Charles Ingalls is a dreamer who cannot hold on to anything. His daughter is sharp-tongued and independent in ways that do not suggest she will make a docile wife. You do not say these things out loud, but you think them, and Laura knows you think them. This is where the hatred begins. You're standing in Dakota Territory in October 1880, and you do not know it yet, but you are about to experience the worst winter in recorded history. The sky is clear, the temperature is mild, the grass is golden, everything looks peaceful, everything looks safe, and everything is about to go catastrophically wrong. This is the autumn before Eliza Jane files her homestead claim. This is the autumn that will shape every decision she makes for the next 6 years. This is the autumn when Almanzo Wilder becomes a hero, and the Ingalls family nearly starves. This is the autumn when the Dakota Prairie shows its teeth. The town of DeSmet has existed for less than a year. The railroad reached here in February. The town was platted in November 1879. Now it is a collection of wooden buildings along a single street surrounded by miles of grassland. 300 people live here, maybe 400. The exact count is unclear because settlers arrive every week, file claims, build shanties, and disappear into the prairie. Charles Ingalls works for the railroad. He also operates a small general store. His family lives in a building on Main Street. His daughters, Mary, Laura, Carrie, and Grace, share a bedroom. Mary is blind. Laura is 13. She is small for her age, dark-haired, and serious. She watches everything. She remembers everything. The Wilder brothers are already here. Royal owns a feed store. Almanzo operates a tree claim and raises horses. They are known in town as reliable, hard-working, and capable. They survived the journey west. They established businesses. They're exactly the kind of young men who are supposed to succeed on the frontier. Eliza Jane is not here yet. She's still teaching in Minnesota, but she is planning. She's saving money. She's preparing to follow her brothers west and file her own claim. She does not know that the winter about to begin will make homesteading look like insanity. October 15th, 1880. The blizzard arrives without warning. One moment, the sky is clear. The next moment, the wind is screaming and snow is falling so thick you cannot see your hand in front of your face. The temperature drops from 40 degrees to 0 in less than an hour. Then it keeps dropping. You are Laura Ingalls, and you are standing in your family's store when the storm hits. You watch through the window as the world disappears. The buildings across the street vanish. The street itself vanishes. There is only white, only wind, only cold that feels like it is cutting through the walls. Your father closes the store. Your family huddles near the stove. Your mother heats water for tea. No one speaks. There is nothing to say. You have lived through blizzards before, but this feels different. This feels like the sky's angry. The storm lasts 3 days. 3 days of continuous wind and snow and cold that makes your bones ache. When it finally ends, the town is buried. Snowdrifts reach the roof lines. The street is impassable. The railroad tracks are completely invisible. The train does not come. This is unusual. The train always comes. Supplies arrive every few days. Mail arrives. News arrives. The train is the lifeline that connects this isolated prairie town to the rest of civilization. Without it, DeSmet is alone. The train does not come in a week. It does not come in 2 weeks. By November, people begin to understand that something is seriously wrong. The railroad is blocked somewhere east of town. Crews are working to clear the tracks, but every time they make progress, another storm buries everything again. DeSmet is cut off, and the blizzards keep coming. November brings 4 more storms. December brings 6. January brings storms so severe that people tie ropes between their houses and their barns so they can find their way back in the whiteout. The temperature drops to 40 below zero, then 50 below. The cold is not something you can describe to someone who has never felt it. It is pain. It is a physical force that presses against you and tries to stop your heart. The town begins to run out of supplies. Kerosene disappears first. Families burn twisted hay for light. Flour runs out next, then sugar, then coffee. By January, people are grinding wheat in coffee mills to make coarse flour. They are eating bread made from seed wheat that was supposed to be saved for spring planting. They are burning furniture to stay warm. Royal Wilder's feed store has inventory, but the inventory is finite. He cannot restock. Every sale brings him closer to empty shelves. He extends credit to families who have no money. He writes their names in a ledger book. He knows most of them will never be able to pay. He does it anyway because the alternative is watching his neighbours starve. Almanzo watches the town slowly suffocate. He has wheat stored in his building. He has hay for his horses. He's better prepared than most. But he also understands that preparation only delays the inevitable. If the railroad does not break through soon, people will die. Then, in mid-January, a rumour reaches town. A farmer named Anderson, 12 miles south of DeSmet, has wheat, maybe 60 bushels, maybe more. He's willing to sell, but only if someone can reach him. Only if someone is willing to risk the journey through 12 miles of hip-deep snow and sub-zero cold and storms that can rise in minutes and kill you before you realize you're lost. Almanzo volunteers. A young man named Cap Garland volunteers with him. They're both in their early 20s. They are both strong. They are both insane enough to think they can survive this. They leave on a morning when the temperature is 15 below zero and the sky's clear. This counts as good weather in January 1881. They ride 2 horses. They carry empty grain sacks. They promise to return by nightfall. The entire town watches them disappear into the white landscape, and then everyone waits. You are Almanzo Wilder, and you are 12 miles from town with 60 pounds of wheat tied behind your saddle, and you are beginning to understand that you might die today. The temperature is 20 below zero. The wind is rising. The sky, which was clear when you left Anderson's farm, is now turning grey. Another storm is coming. You can feel it in the air. You can see it in the way the horses are moving, nervous and quick. Cap Garland rides beside you. He is 19 years old. He is grinning like this is an adventure. Maybe for him it is. For you, this is arithmetic. 12 miles at 3 miles per hour through deep snow equals 4 hours of travel. 4 hours in sub-zero cold with a storm approaching equals probable frostbite and possible death. The wheat costs $1.25 per bushel. Anderson charged triple the normal price because he knew you were desperate. You paid it because the alternative was watching families starve. The horses push through snowdrifts that reach their chests. The snow is old and crusted on top, but it breaks through to powder underneath. Every step is a struggle. The animals are strong, but they are tiring. You can feel it in the way they move. They need rest, but if you stop, you freeze. Your face is numb. Your hands inside thick gloves are losing feeling. Your feet in heavy boots might as well be blocks of wood. This is what cold does. It takes pieces of you gradually. First the feeling, then the function, then the flesh itself. Frostbite does not hurt at first. It just stops, and by the time you realise something is wrong, the damage is permanent. You think about the town behind you. You think about the families running out of food. You think about children eating bread made from flour stretched so thin it barely holds together. You think about your Brother Royal's store with its nearly empty shelves. You think about the Ingalls family, always poor, always struggling, always one disaster away from complete failure. You think about Laura Ingalls. She is 13. She's too young for you to be thinking about her, but you think about her anyway. She's small and serious and smart in a way that makes her stand out even in a town full of struggling survivors. She's not spoken to you much. She's a child. But something about her stays in your mind. You shake your head. You focus on the trail. The storm is building, the wind is increasing, the snow begins to fall, not heavy yet, but enough to blur the horizon, enough to make navigation difficult. This is how people die on the prairie, not dramatically, not in a single catastrophic moment. They die slowly, lost in a landscape with no landmarks, walking in circles until exhaustion and cold stop their hearts. The prairie does not kill you with violence, it kills you with emptiness. You push the horses faster. Cap follows. Neither of you speaks. There is no breath to waste on words. Every ounce of energy goes into moving forward, into not stopping, into getting the wheat back to town before the storm makes travel impossible. The wind rises to a howl. The snow thickens. Visibility drops to 50 feet, then 20, then 10. You can barely see Cap riding beside you. You navigate by instinct and memory. The railroad tracks should be ahead and to your right. If you can find the tracks, you can follow them into town. If you cannot find the tracks, you are lost. Your horse stumbles. You feel the animal's front legs buckle as it breaks through a hidden drift. For one terrible second, you think the horse will go down completely. If it falls, if it cannot get back up, you are stranded. You will have to abandon the animal and walk, and walking in this storm is a death sentence, but the horse recovers. It lurches forward, finds solid footing and keeps moving. You pat its neck. The animal's coat is covered in frost. Ice hangs from its mane. The horse is suffering just as much as you are. But it keeps going because you ask it to. You find the railroad tracks. The rails are buried under snow, but the raised bed of the railway creates a subtle ridge you can follow. You turn the horses onto the track bed. The footing is better here. The railway company cleared this route earlier in the winter, and although new snow has covered it, the base is more solid. The storm intensifies. The wind drives snow horizontal. You can see nothing now, only white, only cold, only the tracks beneath you. You trust the horses, you trust the rails, you ride blind and hope that hope is enough. Then, through the storm, you see shapes, buildings, the outskirts of DeSmet. You have made it. You ride into town like ghosts. People emerge from doorways. They stare. They did not expect you to return. They thought you were dead. Some of them are crying. Not from joy, from relief. Because the wheat tied behind your saddles means they will not starve this week. You do not feel like a hero. You feel cold. You feel tired. You feel lucky. But the town sees something else. They see courage. They see salvation. They see a story worth remembering. And 35 years later, Laura Ingalls Wilder will write this story in a book called The Long Winter, and millions of children will read about the brave young man who saved a starving town. Almanzo Wilder will become immortal. Not as he actually was, cold, scared, doing what needed to be done, but as legend, the hero, the romantic figure, the man worth marrying. You're sitting in your family's building on Main Street in February 1881, and you're eating bread that tastes like desperation. Your mother made it from wheat ground in a coffee mill. The flour is coarse and brown, the bread is dense and hard. It fills your stomach but provides little else. This is the 8th week of eating nothing but wheat bread. No meat, no vegetables, no butter. Just bread and weak tea made from the same wheat roasted until it turns dark. You are Laura Ingalls, and you are 14 years old, and you are learning that survival is not noble. It is tedious. It is exhausting. It is the grinding sameness of hunger and cold and darkness. The books that will someday be written about this winter will make it sound like an adventure. They will emphasize courage and community and the triumph of human spirit. They will not mention the way your mother sits silently by the stove, too tired to speak. They will not mention the way your father's hands shake when he twists hay into fuel. They will not mention the smell of the shanty, confined and stale because opening a window means inviting in cold that could kill you. The blizzards continue through February, through March, through April. The town exists in a state of suspended animation. No one travels, no one trades, no one does anything except survive until the next storm passes and then prepare for the one after that. The railroad remains blocked. Crews are working somewhere east of town, but their progress is invisible to you. For all you know, the railroad has given up. For all you know, the rest of the world has forgotten that DeSmet exists. Mary sits by the window. She cannot see the snow, but she can hear the wind. She can feel the cold radiating through the glass. She asks questions. When will the trains come? When will we have butter again? When will this end? Your mother answers with reassurances that sound increasingly hollow. Soon, Mary. Very soon. The railroad will break through any day now, but the railroad does not break through any day. It breaks through on May 10th, 1881. 7 months after the first blizzard, 7 months of isolation, hunger, cold, and darkness. 7 months that will shape every person who survived it. When the train finally arrives, the entire town gathers at the depot. Some people cry, some people cheer, some people simply stand in silence, too exhausted to react. The locomotive pulls freight cars loaded with flour, sugar, coffee, kerosene, lumber, and all the supplies that should have arrived in November. The prices are catastrophic. Flour costs $12 per barrel, triple the normal rate. The suppliers know the town is desperate. They charge accordingly. Your father buys flour, he buys sugar, he buys coffee beans. The cost makes him wince, but he pays it because the alternative is continuing to grind wheat in a coffee mill. Your mother cooks a real meal that night. Biscuits with butter, potatoes, salt pork, coffee with sugar. The food tastes like salvation. But the winter has taken something from everyone. The Ingalls family is poorer than before. The money spent on supplies during the winter was money that should have gone to proving up the Homestead claim. Your father is behind on improvements, behind on cultivation, behind on everything. The hard winter set him back years. It set everyone back years. Almanzo Wilder becomes famous. The story of his ride to Anderson's farm spreads through the county. Newspapers print accounts. Settlers arriving in the spring hear the tale from multiple sources. He is the young man who saved DeSmet. He is the brave soul who risked death to bring wheat to starving families. He is a hero. He does not think of himself this way. To him, it was necessity. Someone had to go. He had horses. He knew the risks. He survived through luck as much as skill. But perception matters more than reality. And the perception is that Almanzo Wilder is someone special, someone capable, someone worth knowing. You notice him after the winter ends. You noticed him before, of course. He was one of the young men in town. But now you notice him differently. He's 24 years old. He's tall and strong and quiet. He does not boast about the wheat ride. He does not tell the story in saloons or at dances. He simply goes back to work on his tree claim, raising Morgan horses and building his future. You are 14. He's a decade older. Nothing will happen for years, but something has shifted. The winter created bonds between people who survived together. It created debts, not financial debts, but emotional ones. The town owes Almanzo something. You owe him something, and debts like that shape relationships in ways you cannot yet predict. This is the world that Eliza Jane Wilder enters in 1881 when she arrives in Dakota Territory to file her homestead claim. She arrives in a town that has been traumatized. She arrives in a community that has been forged by suffering. She arrives as an outsider, even though her brothers are established residents, because surviving the hard winter together created a bond that no one who arrived after can fully share. She will teach the children who lived through this winter. She will try to impose order on students who have already survived something she cannot imagine. She will stand at the front of a classroom and demand respect from children who watch their parents nearly starve, and she will fail. Not because she is incompetent, but because she was not there. She did not suffer with them. She did not earn her place through shared trauma. And on the frontier, shared trauma is currency. The town will never fully accept her, and Laura Ingalls will never forgive her for judging Almanzo's choices. You are Eliza Jane Wilder, and you are standing in front of 160 acres of unbroken prairie in June 1881, holding a breaking plough that weighs more than you do. The handle is rough wood, the blade is iron, the design is simple, a massive curved blade pulled by oxen to cut through prairie sod 6 inches deep. You cannot lift this plough alone. You cannot operate it alone. You cannot break this land alone, but the Land Office does not care about that. The Homestead Act requires improvement. You must cultivate a portion of your claim. You must build a dwelling. You must demonstrate that you are actually farming this land, not just sitting on it waiting for speculators to drive up prices. The law is gender neutral in theory. In practice, it assumes you have muscles you do not have and capital you do not possess. You hired a man with a team of oxen. His name is Hansen. He is Norwegian. His English is broken but functional. His price is $3 per acre. You want 5 acres broken. That is $15. That is half a month of teaching wages. You hand him the money. He nods. He hooks the oxen to the plough. And then he begins destroying an ecosystem that took 10,000 years to develop. The plough cuts into the sod with a sound like tearing canvas. The grass roots are thick as rope. They weave together in a mat so dense that nothing can penetrate it without violence. The oxen strain. The plough blade slices through roots and soil and centuries of accumulated organic matter. The sod comes up in strips 2 feet wide and 6 inches thick. The smell is overwhelming, rich, rotting, ancient. This soil has never been touched by metal. Bacteria and fungi and microorganisms that have lived here since the glaciers receded are suddenly exposed to sunlight and air. The smell is the smell of death, of transformation, of progress. If you believe that progress is the same as domination, you do not think of it this way. No one does. You think, this land will grow wheat. This land will feed people. This land is mine. The Dakota Sioux who lived here until 3 years ago do not factor into your calculations. They are gone. The land is open. That is all that matters. Hansen works for 3 days. By the end, 5 acres of prairie lie broken and exposed. The turned sod looks like black wounds across the grass. You will plant wheat in the spring. For now, you must build. The claim shanty goes up in 2 weeks. You hire carpenters. You buy lumber shipped by rail from Minnesota. The cost makes you dizzy. Boards that should cost $2 cost $6, delivered to Dakota Territory. Everything is expensive on the frontier because everything must be shipped, and railroads charge whatever they want. But without a dwelling, you cannot prove residence. Without residence, you forfeit the claim. The shanty is 8 feet by 10 feet, 80 square feet. Smaller than many people's closets in the 21st century. The walls are thin boards. The roof is tar paper over rough planks. The floor is dirt. There is 1 window, 1 door, and a small sheet iron stove for heat. The stovepipe goes through the roof and needs constant attention because tar paper catches fire easily. You move in with a trunk of clothing, a narrow bed, a table, 1 chair, and a box of books. The books are impractical. They take up space. They serve no survival function. You bring them anyway because you are not just surviving. You are living, and living requires more than food and shelter. The first night in the shanty is the loneliest night of your life. The walls are so thin you can hear the wind passing through gaps in the boards. The darkness is absolute. There are no streetlights. No neighbours close enough to see their windows. No sounds except wind and the occasional coyote howl. You lie in the narrow bed and listen to the prairie, and you understand why so many homesteaders go insane. Isolation is not romantic. It is not peaceful. It is a weight that presses on your mind. Human beings are social creatures. We need voices. We need faces. We need the ambient noise of other people existing nearby. Without that, the mind begins to fracture. Some homesteaders talk to themselves. Some talk to animals. Some stop talking entirely and retreat into silence so deep their families cannot pull them back. You survive by planning. You make lists. You calculate expenses. You write letters to your brothers, to your parents, to former teaching colleagues. The act of writing connects you to the world beyond the prairie. Even if the letters take weeks to arrive, even if the responses take weeks to return, the communication itself is a lifeline. But letters do not pay bills. Letters do not plant wheat. Letters do not build fences or dig wells or repair roofs. For that, you need money. And for money, you need work. Teaching is the only option. So when the DeSmet school board posts a notice seeking a teacher for the winter term of 1882, you apply immediately. You're qualified. You have taught for years. You have references. You're educated beyond most frontier teachers. The school board interviews you. They ask about discipline methods. They ask about curriculum. They ask if you can manage a classroom of rough prairie children. You assure them you can. You have done it before. You can do it again. They hire you. $30 per month. 3 months of work. The term begins in November. You move into a boarding house in town for the winter. The shanty will sit empty until spring. This is acceptable. The law requires residence, but it does not require continuous residence during the first years. You are balancing two impossible demands. Homesteading requires constant presence, but teaching requires you to be elsewhere. Thousands of women homesteaders face this same problem. They teach school to earn money to improve claims they cannot improve because they are teaching school. It is a trap with no exit. You either have capital or you have labour. You cannot have both. You are standing at the front of the DeSmet school on a November morning in 1882, and 23 students are staring at you with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. The room smells like wet wool and wood smoke. The stove in the corner burns coal now that the trains are running again. The windows are small and let in inadequate light. The desks are rough benches with plank writing surfaces. Everything is plain. Everything is functional. Nothing is beautiful. This is your classroom for the next 3 months. These are your students. Most of them are children of homesteaders who survived the hard winter. They are tougher than you. They have endured things you have not, and some of them resent you for that. Laura Ingalls sits in the third row. She is 15 years old. She's small and dark-haired and serious. Her face is carefully neutral. She does not smile. She does not fidget. She simply watches. And you can feel her judgment like a physical presence. You do not know why she dislikes you. You have done nothing to her. You have barely spoken to her outside of classroom context, but the dislike is palpable. It radiates from her in waves. Years from now, you will learn that she views you as pretentious, incompetent, and unworthy of respect. You will learn this by reading a book she writes where you are portrayed as a fool. But today, you only know that this 15-year-old girl hates you, and you do not understand why. The boys in the back row are the real problem. Cap Garland, who rode with Almanzo to get wheat during the hard winter, sits with his chair tilted back against the wall. He is 17. He is too old for school, but his parents insist he finish his education. He does not want to be here. He makes that clear through every gesture, every smirk, every whispered comment to the boy next to him. You call the class to order. You assign morning recitations. The younger children obey. The older students drag their feet. Cap ignores you entirely. You repeat the instruction. He looks at you with open contempt. This is a test. Every teacher faces it. The students push to see where the boundaries are. If you do not establish authority now, you will never have control. You walk to Cap's desk. You stand beside him. You do not raise your voice. You simply state, clearly and firmly, that he will recite his lesson or he will stay after school for detention. He stares at you. The room is silent. Every student watches to see what happens next. Cap recites his lesson. Poorly, mockingly, but he recites it. You have won this round. But the war is not over. The war will continue every day for the next 3 months, and you are already tired. Teaching is exhausting in ways that non-teachers cannot understand. It is not the academics. It is the constant management of personalities, moods, conflicts, and defiance. It is maintaining authority while also being fair. It is disciplining students who need discipline while not crushing the spirit of students who need encouragement. It is 23 different people with 23 different needs, and you are one person trying to meet all of them simultaneously. By noon, your voice is hoarse. By afternoon, your head aches. By the time you dismiss class at 4, you're so tired you can barely walk back to your boarding house. And tomorrow, you will do it again, and the day after that, for 3 months straight. Laura writes in her mental notebook. She records your mistakes, the time you stumbled over a geography question. The time Cap talked back and you did not punish him harshly enough. The time you assigned an essay topic she thought was stupid. Every failure, every misstep, every human moment of imperfection is filed away in her memory. She does not record the successes. She does not mention the times you stayed late to help a struggling student. She does not mention the way you brought books from your personal collection to lend to children whose families owned no books. She does not mention that you're doing 2 jobs simultaneously, teaching and homesteading, and that the strain is crushing you. She records only what fits her narrative, that you are incompetent, pretentious, and unworthy. And decades later, when she writes Little Town on the Prairie, that narrative will be the only one that survives. Millions of readers will accept her version as truth. They will laugh at Miss Wilder, the foolish teacher who could not control her classroom. They will never know that the real Eliza Jane taught multiple terms, maintained her homestead, and succeeded in ways that Laura conveniently forgot. This is how history is written, not by facts, not by documents, but by the person who controls the story. And Laura Ingalls Wilder will control this story completely. You dismiss class. The students flood toward the door. Laura walks past without speaking. You watch her go and feel a flicker of unease. You do not know why this girl dislikes you so intensely. You do not know that she views you as an obstacle between her and Almanzo. You do not know that family dynamics you barely understand are shaping her perception of everything you do. You only know that something is wrong, and you cannot fix it. You're Eliza Jane Wilder, and it is December 1882, and you're sitting in your boarding house room trying to understand why your relationship with your brother's future wife is so catastrophically broken. You've done nothing wrong. You've been polite. You've been professional. You have treated Laura Ingalls exactly the same as every other student, and yet the hostility is unmistakable. The problem is Almanzo. It has always been Almanzo. You helped raise him. You changed his diapers when he was a baby. You taught him to read. You scolded him when he misbehaved. For the first 7 years of his life, you were essentially a second mother. That bond does not disappear just because he is now 25 years old and courting a girl. You still see him as your little brother. You still feel protective. You still think you know what is best for him. And what is best for him, in your opinion, is not Laura Ingalls. She is too young, 15 years old to his 25, a decade of difference. This is not scandalous by 1880 standards, but it is notable. Girls often married older men. But Laura is not just young in years. She is young in temperament. She is impulsive, opinionated, and sharp-tongued. She does not strike you as someone who will make a calm, supportive wife. She is also poor. The Ingalls family has nothing. Charles Ingalls is a perpetual dreamer who cannot hold on to money or land. He has dragged his family across the Midwest for 20 years, always chasing the next opportunity, always failing. His daughters have grown up in poverty. They have learned to make do with scraps. This builds character, perhaps, but it does not build stability. Almanzo deserves better. He has worked hard. He has built a successful tree claim. He raises Morgan horses. He has a future. He could marry a woman from a prosperous family. He could marry someone educated, refined, stable. Instead, he is courting a 15-year-old girl whose family lives on the edge of destitution. You have not said these things to Almanzo. You're not that foolish. You know that telling a man his romantic choice is wrong is the fastest way to make him double down on that choice. But you have made your opinion clear through small comments, through careful silences, through the way you interact with Laura in the classroom. Laura knows you disapprove, and she hates you for it. Not just dislikes, not just resents, hates. The kind of deep, burning hatred that only teenage girls can summon for women they perceive as threats. You are the authority figure standing between her and what she wants. You are the older sister who judges her. You are the educated woman who makes her feel inferior. This hatred will poison your relationship forever. Even after Laura marries Almanzo in 1885, even after you move away from DeSmet, even after decades pass, the hatred will remain. It will simmer, it will grow, and eventually it will be immortalized in print. But you do not know this yet. You only know that the winter of 1882 is miserable. You are teaching students who do not respect you. You are living in a boarding house where the walls are thin and the food is bad. You're worrying about your homestead claim sitting empty while you work in town. You're watching your brother court a girl you do not approve of, and you are exhausted. By February you are sick. Not seriously. Just the constant low-grade illness that comes from overwork and stress. A cough that will not go away. Headaches. Fatigue so deep that getting out of bed feels impossible. You push through. You teach every day. You do not complain. Complaining is weakness. And you cannot afford weakness. The school term ends in March. You have survived. The school board does not fire you. They do not complain. By all objective measures, you have done your job adequately. But adequacy is not the same as success. You know the students did not love you. You know you did not inspire them. You know that when they remember this school year, they will not remember you fondly. You return to your homestead in April. The shanty is exactly as you left it. Cold, empty, lonely. You begin the work of spring planting. You hire help to break more sod. You plant wheat. You plant a small garden. You repair the roof. You improve the claim. This is the pattern for the next 3 years. Teach in winter. Homestead in summer. Earn money. Spend money. Survive. Repeat. The cycle is grinding. It wears you down slowly. But you persist because the alternative is giving up. And giving up means forfeiting the claim. Forfeiting your independence. Forfeiting the only security you will ever have. In August 1885, Almanzo marries Laura Ingalls. You attend the wedding, you smile, you congratulate them. You do not say what you are thinking. You return to your claim and your teaching and your relentless, exhausting work. And you wait for your life to get easier. It never does. You're Eliza Jane Wilder, and it is September 1885, and your brother has just married the girl who despises you. The wedding was simple. No elaborate ceremony, no fancy dress. Laura wore a plain black cashmere. Almanzo wore his Sunday suit. A Congregationalist minister named Edward Brown officiated in the parsonage. Laura insisted the vows not include the word obey. The minister agreed. They were married in 10 minutes. You stood in the back and watched. You smiled when expected. You congratulated them afterward. Your voice sounded normal. Your face showed nothing. Inside, you felt something twist, not jealousy, not quite. More like watching someone you love make a choice you cannot support, and knowing there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. Laura is 18 now, still young but legally an adult. Almanzo is 28. The age gap that bothered you 3 years ago bothers you still, but no one else seems concerned. This is how marriages work on the frontier. Older men marry younger women. Men with property marry women without. The system is practical. It is also profoundly unequal. They move into a small house on Almanzo's tree claim. He has built a frame house, not a shanty. 2 rooms, a real floor, glass windows. It is modest by Eastern standards but represents significant investment on the frontier. Almanzo is doing well. His Morgan horses are sought after. His tree claim is proving up nicely. He's exactly the kind of stable, successful young man who should be making a good marriage. You tell yourself Laura will be fine. You tell yourself she'll grow into the role of farmer's wife. You tell yourself that your concerns are overblown, but you do not believe it. You have seen how she looks at Almanzo, like he is salvation, like he will rescue her from the poverty she grew up in. That kind of desperation makes for complicated marriages. You return to your own claim, your own shanty, your own relentless work. The contrast is stark. Almanzo has a wife now, someone to share the labour, someone to cook and clean and help with planting and harvest. You have no one. You do the work alone or you hire help you cannot afford. This is the reality of single women homesteading. The law treats you equally. The practical demands do not. Fall 1885 brings good weather. Your wheat crop is decent. Not abundant, but decent. You harvest with hired help. The cost of harvesting nearly equals the profit from selling the grain, but at least you break even. Breaking even counts as success when you are balancing on the edge of financial disaster. Winter comes, you take another teaching position, not in DeSmet this time, a school 12 miles west. The pay is the same, $30 per month. The students are different, but the challenges are identical. Discipline problems, supply shortages, parents who think they know better than you how to teach their children. You survive the term, you save the wages, you return to the claim in spring. This becomes your life. Teach, homestead, survive, repeat. The years blur together. 1886, 1887, 1888. Each year a little harder than the last. Each year wearing you down a little more. You watch from a distance as Almanzo and Laura struggle. They have a daughter in December 1886. Rose, a healthy baby. You visit once. The house is small and crowded. Laura looks exhausted. New mothers always do. You do not stay long. The atmosphere is tense. Laura still does not like you. Marriage has not softened her opinion. Then, disaster strikes. In 1888, Almanzo contracts diphtheria. He survives, but the illness leaves him partially paralysed. His legs never fully recover. For the rest of his life, he will walk with a slight limp and tire easily. The strong young man who rode through blizzards to save a starving town is now someone who struggles with physical labour. Laura nurses him. She takes in sewing. She does farm work that should be his. Their finances collapse. The tree claim becomes a burden rather than an asset. They are drowning in debt, and still Laura does not ask you for help. She would rather starve than accept assistance from you. You do not offer. Pride prevents you. The same pride that made you file a homestead claim alone. The same pride that keeps you teaching in one-room schoolhouses for wages that barely cover expenses. The same pride that will, eventually, destroy your health. By 1889, you are 39 years old. You have been homesteading for 8 years. You have taught more school terms than you can count. You have broken sod, planted wheat, built fences, dug wells, and done labour that men twice your size struggle with, and you are tired in a way that sleep does not fix. This is not the romantic exhaustion of hard work well done. This is the bone-deep fatigue of a body being used up. Your hands shake, your back aches constantly. You catch every illness that passes through your classroom. You lose weight you cannot afford to lose. Your reflection in the small mirror in your shanty shows a woman who looks 50. You're killing yourself, slowly, methodically, through the simple act of trying to sustain 2 impossible demands simultaneously. You need to homestead to keep the claim. You need to teach to afford to homestead. The contradiction has no solution. You are trapped in a system that promised freedom but delivered only grinding, relentless exhaustion. And still you persist, because giving up means admitting failure. And you're not ready to admit that yet. You are Eliza Jane Wilder, and it is January 1890, and you're standing in front of a classroom in a town whose name you will not remember 10 years from now, and you cannot stop coughing. The cough started 3 weeks ago. A tickle in your throat. You ignored it. Then it became persistent. A dry, hacking cough that interrupts lessons and makes students stare. Now it is productive. You cough and taste blood. This is not good. You know this is not good. Women die from lung ailments on the prairie. Consumption, pneumonia, bronchitis that never heals, the cold, the dust, the constant exposure to illness in crowded schoolrooms, all of it destroys lungs gradually. You have watched it happen to other teachers. You told yourself it would not happen to you. You were wrong. The school board sends you home in February. Not fired. Not exactly. They phrase it as concern for your health. You should rest. You should recover. They will find a substitute to finish the term. Their concern is genuine, but it is also practical. A teacher who cannot stop coughing cannot teach effectively. You are a liability. You return to your shanty. It is February. The shanty is freezing. The stove consumes fuel faster than you can gather it. You lie in bed under every blanket you own and cough until your ribs hurt. You heat water for tea. The tea helps for 5 minutes. Then the coughing returns. You think about going to a doctor. The nearest doctor is in DeSmet. That means travelling 12 miles in winter. That means spending money you do not have. That means admitting you are sick enough to need help. You do none of these things. You lie in the shanty and wait for your body to heal itself. It does not heal, it gets worse. The cough deepens. Fever arrives. You lose track of days. The shanty could be a tomb. No one visits. No one checks on you. This is the reality of living alone on an isolated claim. If you die here, it might be weeks before anyone finds your body. But you do not die. Your body, stubborn and worn as it is, fights off whatever infection has taken hold. By March, the fever breaks. By April, the cough lessens. By May, you can stand without dizziness. You have survived. But survival has cost something. You look at yourself in the mirror and see a stranger. Thin, pale, aged beyond your years. Your hair, which was dark brown, is streaked with grey. Your face is lined. Your hands, which were strong, tremble slightly. You're 40 years old. You look 60. This is what homesteading has done to you. This is the price of independence. Not money, not comfort. Your health, your vitality, your future. You traded all of it for 160 acres of land that you're no longer strong enough to work. The truth you have been avoiding settles over you like the prairie dust. You cannot continue this way. Teaching and homesteading simultaneously is impossible. You must choose, but choosing means giving up something you have worked for 8 years to build. It means admitting that the dream, the beautiful, seductive dream of land ownership and independence, was a trap. You walk your claim in late spring. The wheat you planted last year is thin and patchy. Weeds dominate areas you do not have energy to cultivate. The shanty needs repairs you cannot afford. The fences need mending. The well needs deepening. Every part of the claim demands labour and capital you no longer possess. The land that was supposed to set you free has imprisoned you. The independence you sought has isolated you. The security you worked toward has destroyed your health. And for what? For 160 acres of semi-arid prairie that barely produces enough wheat to cover expenses, you sit on the step of your shanty and do arithmetic. If you prove up the claim, you will own the land outright. You can sell it. But land prices in Dakota Territory are falling. The boom is over. The wet years that brought settlers west have ended. Drought is returning. Farmers are failing. The ones who stay are the ones too poor to leave. Land that sold for $10 an acre in 1880 sells for $3 an acre now. 160 acres at $3 per acre equals $480. That is less than 5 years of teaching wages. You have worked for 8 years. You have destroyed your health. You have sacrificed every comfort. And the return on investment is $480. You laugh. It comes out bitter. The American dream. Free land for anyone willing to work for it. The greatest opportunity in history. The chance to build something from nothing. It is all true. It is also a lie. Because the land is not free. It costs everything. And what you get in return is barely enough to justify the price. But you are not ready to give up yet. Not quite. You still have time to prove up the claim. You still have energy for one more planting season. You still believe in some stubborn corner of your mind that next year will be better. Next year the rains will come. Next year the wheat will be abundant. Next year you will finally break even. Next year never comes. Next year is a mirage that retreats as fast as you chase it. But you do not know this yet, so you plant again. You hire help you cannot afford. You break more sod. You improve the claim, and you wait for the harvest that will make everything worthwhile. You're Eliza Jane Wilder, and it is August 1893, and you're packing a trunk because you're leaving Dakota Territory forever. The decision was not sudden. It was inevitable. Your body made the choice your mind refused to make. The doctor in DeSmet examined you last month. He listened to your lungs. He asked about the cough that never fully disappears. He told you, in language that was gentle but unmistakable, that staying here will kill you. The prairie is destroying you. The dust, the cold, the constant respiratory infections from teaching in poorly ventilated schoolrooms. Your lungs are damaged, not fatally, not yet. But continuing this life, teaching all winter, homesteading all summer, never resting, never healing, will turn damage into disaster. The doctor recommends leaving, going south, finding a climate that is warm and dry, giving your lungs a chance to recover. You argued. You told him you have a claim to prove up. You told him you are close to final patent. Just 2 more years. The doctor shook his head. 2 more years might be 2 years too long. Your health will not wait for paperwork. So you are leaving. Not permanently. At least that is what you tell yourself. You are leaving temporarily. You will go south. You will recover. You will return when your health improves and finish proving up the claim. This is not surrender. This is strategic retreat. The trunk sits open on the floor of your shanty. You fold clothes carefully, 2 dresses, a winter coat, undergarments, stockings, everything practical, nothing frivolous. You pack books because you cannot imagine life without them. You pack letters from your family. You pack the leather journal where you recorded crop yields and expenses. Documentation of 8 years of work. You leave everything else. The furniture stays, the dishes stay, the pots and pans and blankets and all the accumulated objects that make a house livable stay in the shanty. You tell yourself you will need them when you return. You tell yourself this is not abandonment. It is abandonment. You know it even as you lie to yourself. You will never return to this claim. You will never live in this shanty again. You will never plant another crop, or repair another fence, or spend another winter alone in 80 square feet of inadequate shelter. This chapter of your life is ending. And unlike the neat endings in books, this one does not resolve. It simply stops. You hired a wagon to take you to the train station. The driver arrives at dawn. He loads your trunk. He does not ask questions. People leave Dakota Territory constantly now. The boom is over. The drought has returned. Grasshoppers have returned. Wheat prices have collapsed. The panic of 1893 has destroyed credit systems across the nation. Homesteaders are abandoning claims at rates that make the land offices look like graveyards of dreams. You are one more casualty. One more person who believed the promises and discovered they were true only for the lucky few. The wagon rolls away from your claim. You turn to look back. The shanty looks small against the enormous sky. The wheat field looks weedy and thin. The whole operation looks exactly like what it is, a failed attempt to force security out of land that never wanted to give it. You do not cry. Crying is pointless. You made choices. The choices had consequences. You are living those consequences now. This is not tragedy. This is arithmetic. You gambled on your ability to sustain 2 impossible demands simultaneously. You lost. The train takes you east first, then south. You travel to Louisiana, where the climate is warm and humid and completely unlike the dry cold of Dakota Territory. You stay with distant relatives. You rest. You recover slowly. The cough diminishes. Your strength returns gradually. By winter, you feel almost human again. You do not return to Dakota. You write letters to the land office requesting extensions. You pay fees to maintain the claim, but you do not return. The months turn into years. The claim sits unimproved. Eventually, quietly, it reverts to the government. 8 years of work, 8 years of sacrifice, and in the end, you own nothing. This is not failure unique to you. This is the story of thousands of homesteaders. The statistics are grim. Only 40% of claims are successfully proved up. 60% are abandoned. Disease, drought, debt, isolation, exhaustion, all of it combined to defeat people who arrived with optimism and determination. The frontier does not care about determination. It cares about luck, and your luck ran out. In 1899, at age 48, you marry. His name is Thomas J. Thayer. He is a widower, a farmer in Louisiana, respectable, kind, not wealthy, but stable. You become Mrs. Thayer. You settle into domestic life. You stop teaching. You stop homesteading. You become, finally, what society always expected you to be, a married woman supporting her husband. The independence you fought for evaporates. But so does the grinding, relentless work. You have a home that is not 80 square feet. You have meals you do not cook alone. You have someone who notices if you are sick. The trade-off is your autonomy. But autonomy, you have learned, is exhausting. You live quietly in Louisiana for 30 years. You're active in community organizations. You support women's suffrage. You're known as educated, opinionated, and formidable. But you never speak publicly about your years homesteading in Dakota Territory. That part of your life is closed, sealed, forgotten. Until Laura Ingalls Wilder opens it again with a book. You are Laura Ingalls Wilder. And it is 1929, and you're 62 years old, and you're sitting at a desk in a farmhouse in Missouri writing the story of your life. Your hands are gnarled from decades of farm work. Your eyesight is failing. Your daughter Rose, a successful writer and journalist, has been encouraging you to write your memories for years. She says people will want to read them. She says your pioneer childhood represents something valuable, something authentic, something disappearing from American memory. You pick up your pen. You begin writing. The words come slowly at first, then faster. You're not writing a children's book. Not yet. You're writing the truth as you remember it. The unvarnished adult truth of what frontier life was actually like. The hunger, the cold, the fear, the petty conflicts, the people you loved. The people you despised. The manuscript grows. You call it Pioneer Girl. It is an autobiography. It covers your childhood in Wisconsin, your family's constant moves, the years in Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, and finally Dakota Territory. You write about your father's restlessness, your mother's quiet endurance, your sister Mary's blindness, the hard winter, Almanzo's courtship, your marriage, the early years of struggle, and you write about Eliza Jane Wilder, the teacher you hated, the sister-in-law who judged you, the pretentious, incompetent woman who tried to teach school in DeSmet and failed miserably. You do not soften the portrait. You do not consider that your memory might be biased. You simply write what you remember, and what you remember is contempt. The manuscript is brutal in ways your published books will never be. You describe poverty without romanticism. You describe neighbours without charity. You describe conflicts without resolution. This is adult literature, raw, honest, unfiltered by nostalgia or sentimentality. Rose reads the manuscript. She sees potential, but she also sees problems. It is too honest, too harsh, too adult. Publishing houses will not accept this as autobiography. The market for pioneer memoirs is limited. But children's literature, that is different. Children's literature is booming. Publishers want wholesome stories about American history. They want books that teach values. They want sanitized versions of the past that make children proud of their heritage. Rose suggests revision, not minor edits, complete reconstruction. Turn the autobiography into a series of children's books. Remove the harsh edges. Add warmth. Emphasize family bonds, courage, perseverance, and optimism. Make the pioneers heroic. Make the hardships surmountable. Make the story something parents want their children to read before bed. You resist at first. This is your story, your truth. Changing it feels like lying. But you also need money. The Depression has destroyed your savings. Your farm barely produces enough to survive. Rose is supporting you financially, but that rankles. You're 70 years old and dependent on your daughter. Writing could change that. If the books sell, you will have income, independence, security. You agree to the revision. You and Rose work together. She suggests structural changes. You rewrite scenes. Together you transform Pioneer Girl from raw memoir into Little House in the Big Woods, the first book in what will become an 8-volume series. The book is published in 1932. You're 65 years old. You're a published author. The book succeeds. Not spectacularly, but enough. Publishers want more. You write Farmer Boy about Almanzo's childhood in New York. Then Little House on the Prairie. Then On the Banks of Plum Creek. Each book more popular than the last. By the late 1930s, the Little House books are beloved. Children across America read them. Teachers assign them in schools. Librarians recommend them. You receive fan mail by the hundreds. And then you write Little Town on the Prairie. Published in 1941, this book covers your teenage years in DeSmet. The hard winter, your time teaching school, the social events, the courtship with Almanzo, and inevitably your school term with Miss Eliza Jane Wilder. You make her a fool. Completely, thoroughly. Miss Wilder in the book is incompetent, pretentious, and unable to control her classroom. She plays favourites. She misjudges situations. The students mock her. Laura, the protagonist, defies her with justified righteousness. The reader is meant to sympathise with Laura and laugh at Miss Wilder. Every scene is calculated to make Eliza Jane ridiculous. When she loses control of the boys, it is portrayed as her failure, not as the universal challenge every frontier teacher faced. When she assigns essays, they are presented as pretentious busy work. When she speaks with authority, it reads as arrogance. You have taken a real person, a woman who homesteaded alone, who taught multiple school terms, who survived everything the frontier threw at her and reduced her to a caricature. Rose helps polish the prose. She sharpens the humorous moments. She emphasises the conflict. She knows readers love a villain, especially a petty, incompetent villain who gets what she deserves. Miss Wilder is perfect for this role. She has authority but loses it. She has pretensions but fails to live up to them. She's the kind of antagonist that makes readers feel superior. The book is published. It sells well. Children love it. Adults who read the series to their children love it. No one questions the portrayal. No one asks whether Laura's version is accurate. No one wonders what Eliza Jane's side of the story might be, because Eliza Jane died in 1930. She has been dead for 11 years when Little Town on the Prairie is published. She cannot defend herself. She cannot correct the record. She is simply the villain in a beloved children's book. And that is how history is written. Not by facts, not by documents, but by the person who survives long enough to tell the story. You're Eliza Jane Wilder Thayer, and it is June 1st, 1930, and you are dying in Crewley, Louisiana. You are 79 years old. Your body, which survived Dakota blizzards and homestead labour, and years of teaching in one-room schoolhouses, is finally giving out. The cause of death will be listed as heart failure. The real cause is age and exhaustion, and the accumulated toll of a hard life. You do not know that in the same year, 500 miles away in Missouri, your former sister-in-law is beginning to write a manuscript that will define you for history. You do not know that Laura Ingalls Wilder is sitting at a desk composing Pioneer Girl, the autobiography that will eventually become the Little House series. You do not know that she is writing about you, that she is recording every perceived slight, every classroom failure, every moment of conflict from 47 years ago. If you knew, what would you say? Would you write your own version? Would you explain that teaching frontier children was nearly impossible for everyone? Would you describe the exhaustion of homesteading alone while trying to maintain a teaching career? Would you point out that you taught multiple terms successfully, that you proved up your claim, that you survived when 60% of homesteaders failed? You will never get the chance. You die before Laura's manuscript is complete. You die before the Little House books are published. You die before Miss Wilder becomes a character that millions of children will read about and laugh at. You die believing that your life, while difficult, was your own. You die not knowing that your reputation will be posthumously destroyed by a woman who never forgave you for perceived slights from adolescence. Your obituary in the Crowley Signal is brief. Mrs. Eliza Jane Thayer, 79, died Sunday at her home. She survived by her husband, Thomas J. Thayer. Funeral services were held Tuesday, burial in Crowley Cemetery. No mention of homesteading, no mention of teaching, no mention of the years you spent breaking sod in Dakota Territory. Your life is summarized in 4 sentences, and then you are forgotten. Except you are not forgotten, not completely, because Laura remembers you, and Laura is writing a book. And that book will ensure that Eliza Jane Wilder is remembered forever, but remembered wrong. The timing is almost cruel. If you had lived 5 more years, you would have seen Little House in the Big Woods published in 1932. If you had lived 10 more years, you might have been able to respond, to write a letter to the publisher, to point out inaccuracies, to defend yourself. But you died in 1930, and Laura began writing in 1929, and the gap between those dates is just wide enough to ensure your silence. This is not conspiracy. This is not intentional cruelty. This is simply the way history works. The person who writes the story controls the narrative. The person who dies first cannot contest it, and once the narrative is published and beloved by millions, it becomes fixed. It becomes truth. Not factual truth, but cultural truth, the kind of truth that matters more because it lives in collective memory. Your husband Thomas survives you by several years. He does not read the Little House books. He probably does not know they exist. He is an elderly farmer in Louisiana. Children's literature about Dakota Territory is not part of his world. He remembers you as you were in his life, a capable, opinionated, intelligent woman who managed his household and participated in community affairs. He does not know that in children's books across America, you are being portrayed as a fool. Your nieces and nephews, Almanzo and Laura's daughter Rose, and the children of your other siblings, grow up knowing both versions of Eliza Jane, the real woman remembered by family, and Miss Wilder, the literary character. The gap between the two is wide enough to cause discomfort. Some family members defend you, some stay silent. No one publicly contests Laura's version, because Laura is famous, Laura is beloved. Laura's books sell millions of copies. Challenging her narrative feels like challenging American mythology, and so the literary version wins. Miss Wilder becomes the definitive Eliza Jane. When historians write about women homesteaders in the 20th and 21st centuries, they rarely mention Eliza Jane Wilder. When they do mention her, it is often in the context of the Little House books as the mean teacher character. The real woman, the homesteader who filed a claim alone, who taught multiple school terms, who proved up her land, who survived the Dakota frontier, is erased. This is the danger of beloved literature. It replaces history. It becomes the version people believe, and once a story is beloved, especially a story read by children who grow up with deep emotional attachments to the characters, that story becomes unchallengeable. To criticize Laura Ingalls Wilder is to criticize childhood itself. To suggest that Miss Wilder might have been treated unfairly is to attack a cultural icon. You're buried in Crowley Cemetery under a simple stone that reads, Eliza Jane Thayer, 1850-1930. The dates are wrong. You were born in December, not January, and even your birth year is disputed in various records. But the stone stands anyway, marking the grave of a woman whose real story died with her, replaced by a fictional villain that will outlive everyone who knew the truth. You're a child in 1943, and you are reading Little Town on the Prairie for the first time. You are 8 years old. You love the Little House books. You have read every volume. You know Laura and Mary and Ma and Pa like they're your own family. You have imagined living in a little house in the big woods, travelling in a covered wagon, surviving the long winter. These books are not just stories. They are windows into history. They are how you understand what life was like for pioneers. And now you're reading about Miss Wilder, the teacher who comes to DeSmet and immediately loses control of her classroom, the woman who assigns stupid essay topics, the teacher who plays favourites and misjudges situations. You laugh at her. Everyone laughs at her. She is ridiculous. She is incompetent. She is the kind of teacher every student loves to mock. You do not question whether this portrayal is accurate. You are 8 years old. The book is presented as autobiographical. Laura Ingalls. Wilder really lived these events. This is not fiction. This is history. Miss Wilder really was this foolish. That is what the book tells you. That is what you believe. You grow up. You read the books to your own children. They laugh at Miss Wilder just like you did. The contempt passes from generation to generation. By the 1960s, the Little House books are canonical. They are taught in schools. They are recommended by librarians. They are considered essential American literature. Laura Ingalls Wilder is an icon. Her books are unimpeachable. Scholars begin studying the books in the 1970s and 80s. They analyse the themes. They examine the historical context. They write dissertations about frontier life, gender roles, and American identity. Most accept Laura's version of events without question. Why would they doubt it? Laura was there. She lived it. Her books, while simplified for children, are based on real experiences. Some scholars notice inconsistencies. Census records do not always match the books. Events are compressed or rearranged for narrative flow. Characters are composites. But these are accepted as normal literary license. The emotional truth of the books is considered more important than factual accuracy. An emotional truth says that Eliza Jane Wilder was a bad teacher. In 1993, the Little House books are adapted into a television series that runs for 9 seasons. The show is wildly popular. It takes enormous liberties with Laura's books, adding characters, inventing storylines, extending the time frame far beyond Laura's childhood. But it reinforces the basic narrative. The Ingalls family are heroes. Their neighbours and friends are noble pioneers. The villains are greedy bankers, corrupt politicians, and incompetent authority figures. The show does not include Miss Wilder directly, but it reinforces the pattern. Authority figures who misjudge Laura are always wrong. Laura's instincts are always right. The emotional template is set. Trust Laura's version. Trust her judgments. Trust her memories. By the early 2000s, the Little House books have sold more than 60 million copies worldwide. They're translated into 40 languages. They're read in classrooms from California to Japan. Laura Ingalls Wilder's face appears on postage stamps. Her childhood homes are tourist destinations. The Little House on the Prairie brand includes dolls, games, cookbooks, and theatrical productions. The books are not just literature. They are industry. And Eliza Jane Wilder is the villain in all of it. Every new reader discovers Miss Wilder and laughs. Every adaptation reinforces her incompetence. Every scholarly article that mentions her does so in the context of Laura's antagonist. The real woman is completely obscured by the literary character. Then, in 2014, something changes. The South Dakota Historical Society Press publishes Pioneer Girl, the annotated autobiography. This is Laura's original manuscript, the one she wrote before Rose helped her transform it into children's literature. The manuscript is published with extensive annotations by historian Pamela Smith Hill, who spent years researching every detail. The annotations reveal gaps, inconsistencies, moments where Laura's memory conflicts with documented facts. Historians begin re-examining the Little House books more critically. They start asking uncomfortable questions. How much of this is accurate? How much is shaped by Laura's biases? How much is Rose's editorial influence? How much is simply wrong? Eliza Jane becomes a case study. Researchers locate Homestead records proving she successfully filed and proved up a claim. They find documentation of multiple teaching terms, They discover her marriage to Thomas Thayer and her long life in Louisiana. They piece together a portrait of a woman far more capable than Miss Wilder ever was. But this research reaches academic audiences. It is published in historical journals and specialised books. It does not reach the millions of readers who grew up with Littletown on the Prairie. It does not change the collective memory, because collective memory, once established, is nearly impossible to revise. You cannot compete with a beloved children's book. You cannot fight mythology with facts. You cannot correct a story that millions of people read as children and carry in their hearts as truth. The real Eliza Jane Wilder will always lose to Miss Wilder, not because the fictional version is more accurate, but because it was told first, told well, and told to an audience that believed it completely. This is how history becomes mythology. This is how real people become literary devices. This is how personal grudges become cultural truth. And this is why Eliza Jane Wilder, pioneering homesteader and teacher, is remembered primarily as the villain in someone else's story. You're standing in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. in the year 2010, and you are holding a document that most Americans do not know exists. It is a homestead claim filed by a woman named Mattie Oblinger in Fillmore County, Nebraska, in 1873. She is 28 years old. She is unmarried. She claims 160 acres under her own name. She will prove up successfully. She will own her land outright, and then she will disappear from history. Mattie is not alone. The filing cabinets around you contain hundreds of thousands of similar documents, women's names, women's signatures, women claiming land across the American West between 1862 and 1934. The Homestead Act promised land to anyone willing to work for it. And women, thousands upon thousands of women, took the government at its word. The numbers are staggering. Nearly 200,000 women filed solo homestead claims during the 72 years the Homestead Act was active. In some regions, women constituted 12 to 15% of all homesteaders. In areas like Dakota Territory, the percentage was even higher. These were not widows continuing dead husbands' claims. These were single women, divorced women, abandoned women. Women who saw land ownership as the only path to economic security in a world that offered them almost nothing. They succeeded at higher rates than men. Studies show that 42% of women homesteaders successfully proved up their claims compared to only 37% of men. Women were more likely to stay on difficult land, more likely to persist through drought and debt, more likely to use creative strategies, teaching school, taking in boarders, hiring themselves out for harvest, to generate the cash needed to improve their claims. And yet their stories are almost completely absent from American historical memory. When you think of homesteaders, you picture men, weathered farmers in overalls, cowboys, pioneers with axes and plows. You do not picture schoolteachers in long skirts staking claims alone. You do not picture women building sod houses with their own hands. You do not picture female land ownership as a mass phenomenon. This erasure is not accidental, it is structural. The mythology of westward expansion is deeply gendered. Men conquer the wilderness. Women follow, supporting and civilizing. Men are active agents. Women are passive helpers. This narrative is reinforced by thousands of books, movies, paintings, and monuments. The pioneer man is heroic. The pioneer woman is enduring, but independent, landowning, economically autonomous. That version of pioneer women does not fit the story America wants to tell about itself. Eliza Jane Wilder was one of these invisible women. She filed her claim in 1881, joining a wave of female homesteaders flooding into Dakota Territory during the boom years. She was typical in many ways, unmarried, educated, supporting herself through teaching while proving up land, struggling with the impossible mathematics of homesteading while female, needing male labour for heavy work, needing capital she did not have, needing time she could not spare. But she was also atypical in one crucial way. She became famous, not for her homesteading, not for her achievements, but because her brother married a woman who would write best-selling books that portrayed Eliza Jane as a fool. This makes her simultaneously more visible and more distorted than the thousands of other women homesteaders whose names exist only in land office records. You close Mattie Oblinger's file and open another. Anna Berg, who claimed land in Montana in 1891. She built a 2-room cabin alone. She broke 40 acres of sod. She survived winters that dropped to 50 below zero. She proved up in 1996 and sold her land for enough money to open a boarding house in Helena. She lived to be 93. No one wrote books about her. Another file. Lucy Henderson, who claimed land in Wyoming in 1888. She was divorced. Her husband had left her with 3 children and no support. The homestead was her only option. She proved up successfully. She remarried years later to a neighbour homesteader. Together they built a ranch that stayed in the family for 3 generations. No one remembers her name. Another file. Mary O'Neill, Irish immigrant, who claimed land in South Dakota in 1884. She could barely read English. She hired a translator to help her file the paperwork. She worked as a laundress in the nearest town to earn money for improvements. She proved up in 1889. She never married. She lived on her claim until she died in 1921. There is no monument to her. These women were ordinary, that's the point. They were not extraordinary pioneers doing something impossible. They were ordinary women using the legal tools available to them to secure economic independence. The Homestead Act, for all its flaws and violence, built on indigenous displacement serving imperial expansion, was also accidentally radical. It granted property rights to women in an era when married women in many states could not own property at all. Single women could claim land. They could improve it. They could prove up and receive legal title. They could sell it, mortgage it, or pass it to their children. For a brief window in American history, the frontier offered women a form of economic power that was unavailable in the settled East. And thousands of women seized that opportunity. Then history forgot them. Not immediately, but gradually. As the frontier closed and the mythology of westward expansion solidified, women homesteaders disappeared from the narrative. They became footnotes, curiosities, minor characters in stories about men, until historians in the late 20th century began digging through land office records and discovering an entirely hidden dimension of frontier settlement. Eliza Jane Wilder would have been one of these forgotten women. Except Laura Ingalls, Wilder made sure she was remembered. Just not for the right reasons. You're a researcher in the South Dakota State Historical Society archives in Pierre, and you are holding a homestead patent issued to Eliza Jane Wilder in 1888. The document is official, signed by President Grover Cleveland. It transfers 160 acres of public domain land to Eliza Jane Wilder, having satisfied all requirements under the Homestead Act. The land is legally hers. This document does not match the story told in Little Town on the Prairie. In that book, Miss Wilder is incompetent. She loses control of her classroom. She is mocked by students. The implication is clear. She is a failure. But the homestead patent in your hands proves she succeeded at something far more difficult than managing a frontier classroom. She proved up a land claim. She satisfied 5 years of residence and improvement requirements. She became a landowner. You pull more records. The original claim filing from 1881. The notation shows she paid the required fees. She described her intended improvements: cultivation of 20 acres, construction of a dwelling, planting of trees. The handwriting is clear and confident. This is not a woman who is uncertain or incompetent. You find property tax records from Kingsbury County. Eliza Jane paid taxes on her claim from 1881 through 1888. Regular payments, no defaults. She maintained ownership throughout the proving up period and beyond. This contradicts any narrative of abandonment or failure. You search for teaching records. School board minutes from DeSmet are incomplete, but the surviving documents show Eliza Jane taught the winter term of 1882 to 1883. There is no mention of dismissal for incompetence, no scandal, no complaints recorded in official minutes. The board paid her the agreed wages. She completed the term. These are not the records of a failed teacher. Later records show she taught additional terms in other communities. Spring Valley, locations whose names are recorded but whose school records have not survived. Each position represents a school board that hired her, parents who accepted her, students who learned from her. If she were truly incompetent, these positions would not have materialized. Frontier communities did not tolerate bad teachers. They could not afford to. Education was too important, resources too scarce. You find census records. 1880 US Census lists Eliza Jane Wilder, age 29, occupation teacher, living in Spring Valley, Minnesota. 1885 census shows her in Kingsbury County, Dakota Territory, occupation farmer. By 1890, she's gone from Dakota. By 1900, she appears in Louisiana as Eliza Jane Thayer, married, living with husband Thomas. The documentary evidence paints a picture of a capable woman navigating difficult circumstances. She supported herself through teaching. She filed a legal land claim. She proved up successfully. She adapted when health required leaving Dakota. She remarried and built a new life. These are not the actions of the fool portrayed in Laura's books. But documents do not compete with narrative. Facts do not override emotional truth. And the emotional truth that millions of readers absorbed from Little Town on the Prairie is that Miss Wilder was incompetent. That emotional truth shapes how people remember Eliza Jane, regardless of what the records show. You pull one more document, a letter written by Almanzo Wilder to his parents in 1884. The letter is brief. He mentions crops, weather and family news. He mentions Eliza Jane once. Sister is teaching again this winter. Seems to manage well enough. Not effusive praise, but not contempt either. Just a neutral acknowledgement. This suggests the family relationship, while perhaps strained, was not the disaster Laura portrayed. What the records cannot show is emotional texture. They cannot show whether Eliza Jane and Laura truly hated each other, or whether the conflict was more mundane. They cannot show whether classroom discipline issues were exceptional or typical. They cannot show whether Eliza Jane was pretentious or simply educated in a community that valued practical skills over book learning. They cannot show what Eliza Jane thought about any of this, because Eliza Jane left no diary, no autobiography, no written defense. This is the historian's eternal frustration. Documents show what happened. They rarely show why. They never show the full human complexity of motivations, emotions, and relationships. History is not just facts. It is interpretation. And when one party controls the interpretation, when one party writes best-selling books and the other dies silent, the interpretation becomes fixed regardless of what the documents say. Modern historians attempt to recover Eliza Jane's story. Pamela Smith Hill's annotations in the Pioneer Girl publication point out discrepancies between Laura's narrative and documented facts. Other scholars writing about women homesteaders include Eliza Jane as a case study in successful female land ownership. Museums in DeSmet present more nuanced interpretations of the Wilder family dynamics. But these efforts reach limited audiences. Academic papers are not read by millions. Museum exhibits are visited by thousands, not millions. The Little House books have sold 60 million copies. The television adaptation was watched by tens of millions. The cultural saturation of Laura's version is complete. You carefully refile the Homestead patent. The document will sit in the archive, available to researchers who seek it out. It will prove to anyone who looks that Eliza Jane Wilder successfully homesteaded, that she owned land, that she was not a failure. But most people will never look. They will believe what they read in childhood, and what they read was that Miss Wilder was a fool. You're standing in the DeSmet Heritage Museum in present-day South Dakota, and you're looking at an exhibit about Laura Ingalls Wilder. There are photographs of the Ingalls family, artifacts from their homestead, first editions of the Little House books behind glass, a timeline of Laura's life, a map showing all the places the family lived. The exhibit is comprehensive, loving, and enormously popular. Thousands of visitors come here every year to connect with the world Laura described. There is one small panel about Eliza Jane Wilder. It is tucked in a corner. The text is careful. It mentions that she was Almanzo's sister, that she homesteaded near DeSmet, that she taught school, that she was portrayed as Miss Wilder in Little Town on the Prairie. Then, in language that is diplomatically neutral, It notes that historical records suggest Eliza Jane was more capable than her literary portrayal indicated. This is progress. 20 years ago, there would have been no mention of the discrepancy. Eliza Jane would have been presented exactly as Laura described her. But it is not enough. One small panel cannot compete with 8 volumes of beloved literature. It cannot undo decades of readers laughing at Miss Wilder. It cannot restore Eliza Jane's actual story. What was lost when Eliza Jane's story was replaced by Laura's caricature? Not just one woman's reputation, something larger, a template, a possibility. A vision of what frontier women could be. The mythology of westward expansion gives women 2 roles. They are wives, supporting their husband's ambitions, or they are mothers, raising children in harsh conditions. These roles are valuable, they were real, but they were not the only roles women played. Thousands of women were landowners, property holders, economic agents acting independently. And that version of frontier womanhood was systematically erased. Eliza Jane represents what gets lost when we let beloved narratives replace historical complexity. She was a single woman who owned land. She was a professional teacher. She was economically independent for most of her adult life. She made choices to homestead, to stay single into her 40s, to leave Dakota when her health demanded it, to eventually marry on her own terms. These choices represent agency, autonomy, self-determination. But Laura's portrayal strips all that away. Miss Wilder in the books has no interiority, no motivations, no complexity. She exists only as an obstacle for Laura to overcome. She's not a person, she's a plot device. And that reduction from complex human being to 2-dimensional antagonist is a loss not just for Eliza Jane, but for everyone who might have learned from her actual story. Imagine if Laura had written differently. Imagine if she had portrayed Eliza Jane as a woman struggling to balance teaching and homesteading. Imagine if she had shown the exhaustion, the financial calculations, the impossible demands. Imagine if she had written Eliza Jane with empathy instead of contempt. What might readers have learned? That single women could own property. That independence was possible. That frontier women were not just helpmates but actors in their own right. That version was available. Laura knew Eliza Jane homesteaded. She knew Eliza Jane was unmarried. She knew these facts because she lived in the same community. But she chose not to write them. She chose to focus on classroom conflicts and perceived slights. She chose to make Eliza Jane ridiculous rather than complex. And that choice shaped how millions of people understand frontier women. The loss extends beyond Eliza Jane. Every woman homesteader who is forgotten represents a lost model of female possibility. Every story that is not told reinforces the narrative that women were passive participants in westward expansion. Every time we accept the mythology without questioning it, we impoverish our understanding of history. This matters now. It matters because stories shape what people believe is possible. When young women read the Little House books, they absorb lessons about gender. They learn that women can be brave, hard-working, and resilient. But they also learn that women's proper role is as wives and mothers. They do not learn that women owned property independently. They do not learn that the frontier offered economic opportunities to single women. They do not learn that there were alternative paths. Recovering Eliza Jane's story is not just about correcting one historical error. It is about expanding the narrative. It is about showing that frontier women were more diverse, more complex, and more autonomous than popular mythology suggests. It is about recognizing that the stories we tell about the past shape the possibilities we imagine for the future. You leave the museum. The South Dakota Prairie stretches in every direction. The landscape looks peaceful now. Farms with modern equipment, towns with paved streets. The frontier is gone, but its mythology remains. And that mythology continues to shape how Americans understand themselves, their history, and their values. Somewhere in this landscape, Eliza Jane's claim still exists. The land she broke, the acres she improved, the property she owned. The physical evidence of her work has been ploughed under, built over, erased by more than a century of subsequent use. But the land office records remain. The homestead patent remains. The proof that she succeeded remains. It just does not reach the audience that needs to hear it. And so Miss Wilder, the literary fool, remains more real to most people than Eliza Jane Wilder, the homesteader who actually lived. You're standing in what used to be the DeSmet schoolhouse in January 1883, except the building no longer exists. It was torn down decades ago, replaced by a modern school. Then that school was replaced. Now there is a different building entirely. The physical space where Eliza Jane taught and Laura seethed is gone, but the story remains. And the story, as always, is more complicated than either woman admitted. Start with what we know for certain. Eliza Jane Wilder taught the winter term of 1882 to 1883. She was paid $30 per month. She completed the term. These are facts recorded in school board minutes and payment records. Beyond that, we enter the territory of contested memory. Laura claimed Eliza Jane lost control of the classroom, that the boys mocked her, that she played favourites, that she assigned pretentious essay topics, that she was incompetent. But Laura wrote this account 45 years after the events, working from memory shaped by resentment and time. Memory is not reliable. Memory is reconstruction. And reconstruction is always influenced by the emotions attached to the original experience. What would the other students have said? We do not know. None of them wrote memoirs. Cap Garland, who supposedly defied Miss Wilder, left no written account of his school days. The other children who sat in that classroom who witnessed whatever actually happened are all dead. Their memories died with them. Only Laura's version survives. And Laura had reasons to portray Eliza Jane negatively. The romantic triangle, if you can call it that, shapes everything. Laura was in love with Almanzo by 1882. She was 15. He was 25. The courtship would not formalise for another year, but the interest was there. And Eliza Jane, as Almanzo's older sister, represented a threat. Not a romantic threat, a familial one. Eliza Jane's opinion mattered to Almanzo. Her approval or disapproval of his choices carried weight. And Laura knew, or suspected, that Eliza Jane did not approve of her. This is not unusual. In-law tensions are universal across cultures and centuries. The older sister protective of her younger brother, the girlfriend who resents the sister's influence, the conflict between old family bonds and new romantic ones. These dynamics play out in every era. But most people do not write best-selling books about their in-law conflicts. Most people do not have the power to immortalize their resentments in literature that will be read for generations. Consider an alternative interpretation. Eliza Jane was an experienced teacher facing a difficult classroom. Frontier schools were notoriously hard to manage. Single-room schoolhouses with students ranging from age 6 to 18. Boys who were stronger than the teacher. Girls who resented authority. Parents who undermined discipline. Limited resources. No administrative support. Every frontier teacher struggled with these conditions. It was not unique to Eliza Jane. The boys who misbehaved in her classroom likely misbehaved for every teacher. Cap Garland was 17 years old and did not want to be in school. His defiance was predictable. It had nothing to do with Eliza Jane's competence and everything to do with his own resentment at being forced into a classroom when he would rather be working. But in Laura's telling, the defiance becomes evidence of Eliza Jane's failure rather than evidence of a universal teaching challenge. The essay assignment that Laura found pretentious might have been perfectly appropriate for older students. Eliza Jane was educated beyond most frontier teachers. She brought standards from more established schools. Those standards might have seemed excessive in DeSmet, where most students would spend their lives farming, but were they wrong? Or were they simply different from what Laura expected? We cannot know. The original essay prompts are not preserved. Laura's description of them is filtered through her contempt. We have no neutral observer recording what actually happened. We have only Laura's version, written decades later, shaped by personal resentment and editorial collaboration with her daughter Rose. But here is what we can deduce from other evidence. Eliza Jane taught multiple terms in multiple communities after DeSmet. School boards hired her repeatedly. This suggests competence, not failure. Frontier communities did not rehire bad teachers. They could not afford to waste money on incompetence. If Eliza Jane were truly as disastrous as Laura portrayed, her teaching career would have ended in DeSmet. It did not. She taught for years afterward. This creates a puzzle. Either Laura exaggerated the classroom conflicts, or the conflicts were real but not as one-sided as Laura presented them, or the conflicts were specific to the particular chemistry between Eliza Jane and that specific group of students. Any of these interpretations is possible. None can be definitively proven. What we are left with is uncertainty, the historian's least favourite conclusion. We cannot know what really happened in that classroom in the winter of 1882. We know what Laura claimed happened. We know that documentary evidence does not support the narrative of complete failure. We know that Eliza Jane succeeded in other contexts, but we cannot reconstruct the actual day-to-day dynamics of that classroom. Those dynamics are lost to time. This should make us cautious about accepting Laura's version. It should make us question how much of the Little House books is accurate history versus emotionally shaped memory. But caution and questioning do not compete with beloved childhood literature. For most readers, Miss Wilder is real. More real than the uncertain, complex historical Eliza Jane could ever be. And that, perhaps, is the real tragedy. Not that Eliza Jane was mocked by students, but that she was mocked by history. Not that she failed in a classroom, but that she failed to control her own narrative. Not that Laura won a teenage rivalry. But that Laura's victory became permanent through the power of print. You are a family therapist in the 21st century, and a client is describing her relationship with her husband's sister. The sister is older, opinionated, critical. She makes comments about parenting choices. She implies the marriage was a mistake. She treats her brother like he is still a child who needs her guidance. The client is furious. She says she cannot forgive the sister. She says the sister ruined family gatherings. She says she will never forget the slights. This story is not unique. This story is universal. Sister-in-law conflicts are one of the most common family tensions therapists encounter. The dynamics are predictable. The older sister feels protective of her younger sibling. She remembers raising him. She still sees him as someone who needs her guidance. The spouse feels judged, diminished, and excluded from a family bond that predates the marriage. Both women feel threatened. Both women compete for the brother's loyalty. Neither woman is entirely wrong. Neither woman is entirely right. Now transport this dynamic to Dakota Territory in 1882. Remove the therapist. Remove the concept of healthy boundaries. Remove any cultural framework for recognizing that both women have legitimate grievances. Add the stress of frontier survival. Add economic precarity. Add a 7-year age gap between Eliza Jane and Almanzo that made her more like a parent than a sister. Add Laura's poverty and Eliza Jane's education. Add class tensions, gender tensions, and the high stakes of marriage as economic necessity. The conflict was inevitable. It was structural. It had nothing to do with either woman being inherently terrible. It had everything to do with circumstances that pushed them into opposition. Eliza Jane raised Almanzo. This is documented. She was 7 years older. In large families, older daughters functioned as substitute mothers for younger siblings. Eliza Jane changed his diapers, supervised his childhood, taught him to read. When she looked at 25-year-old Almanzo courting 15-year-old Laura, she still saw the little boy she helped raise. Her protective instincts were not irrational. They were the natural result of her role in his upbringing. Laura was 15 and in love. 15-year-olds in love do not appreciate protective older sisters. They see interference, they see judgment, they see obstacles to happiness. Laura's resentment of Eliza Jane was also not irrational. It was the natural result of being young, poor, and sensitive to perceived class condescension. Eliza Jane was educated. Laura's education was interrupted by family poverty and constant moves. Eliza Jane owned land. The Ingalls family owned nothing. These differences were not Eliza Jane's fault, but they created a power imbalance that Laura felt acutely. Add teaching to the mix. Eliza Jane was Laura's teacher. This formalized the power imbalance. In the classroom, Eliza Jane had authority over Laura. Outside the classroom, Eliza Jane was courting her brother. Laura could not escape Eliza Jane's judgment. She could not avoid the comparison. Everywhere Laura looked, Eliza Jane represented something Laura was not. Established, educated, economically secure. The classroom conflicts were real. They had to be. Two strong-willed women in a situation where one had authority over the other, and both were competing for the loyalty of the same man. The surprise is not that they clashed. The surprise would be if they had not clashed. But the conflicts were situational, not evidence of Eliza Jane's inherent incompetence or Laura's inherent vindictiveness. They were two women caught in circumstances that made conflict inevitable. If Eliza Jane had been someone else's sister, would Laura have hated her? Probably not. If Laura had been someone else's student, would Eliza Jane have struggled with classroom management? Possibly. Frontier teaching was hard for everyone, but the emotional charge would have been absent. The personal animosity was specific to their relationship. It was not generalizable to Eliza Jane's teaching ability or Laura's character, but Laura generalized it anyway. In Little Town on the Prairie, Miss Wilder is not just Laura's problematic teacher, she is an incompetent teacher generally. The narrative suggests that all her students found her ridiculous, that her failure was obvious to everyone. This is how personal grievance becomes universal judgment. This is how "I did not like this woman" becomes "this woman was objectively terrible." Modern readers, trained to think about power dynamics and competing perspectives, can see this clearly. We can recognize that Laura was an unreliable narrator for stories involving Eliza Jane. We can understand that personal bias shapes memory. We can hold space for the possibility that both women had legitimate grievances, and neither was a villain. But the millions of readers who encountered these books as children did not have that framework. They read a story where a brave, clever girl defied a foolish, pretentious teacher. They identified with Laura. They laughed at Miss Wilder. And that emotional imprint remained even after they grew up and intellectually understood that stories have perspectives. The sister-in-law wars between Eliza Jane and Laura were ordinary, predictable, understandable. What was extraordinary was that one woman had the power to write the definitive version, and once that version was published and beloved, it became unchallengeable, not because it was accurate, but because it was first, compelling, and read by millions of children who absorbed it as truth. The question is not whether Eliza Jane and Laura hated each other. They probably did. The question is whether that hatred tells us anything meaningful about either woman's character, or whether it just tells us that family dynamics are complicated, and giving one party complete narrative control creates distortion. You are Eliza Jane Wilder Thayer, and it is June 1st, 1930, and you are dying in Crewley, Louisiana, and you do not know that your life story is about to be stolen from you. You do not know that 500 miles away, Laura Ingalls Wilder is beginning to write. You do not know that your name will become synonymous with incompetence for generations of American children. You do not know that the homestead you proved up, the schools you taught, the years you survived alone on the Dakota Prairie will be erased and replaced with a caricature. If you knew, what would you have done? Would you have written your own autobiography? Would you have left letters defending yourself? Would you have contacted publishers preemptively, knowing Laura's books were coming? Or would you have done exactly what you did? Lived quietly, died silently, and let history judge without your testimony? We will never know, because silence, once established, cannot be broken by the dead. And Eliza Jane has been silent for 95 years. Her voice exists only in a handful of letters, a few land office documents, and the negative space in Laura's narrative where a real woman should be but is not. This is the ultimate power of storytelling, not just to shape memory, but to replace it. Laura did not simply tell her version of events, she obliterated Eliza Jane's version by telling hers so compellingly that no alternative seemed possible. Millions of readers absorbed Miss Wilder as fact. They never wondered whether another perspective existed. They never questioned whether Laura might be biased. They simply believed, and belief once established in childhood is almost impossible to dislodge. Even now, even with historians pointing out discrepancies, even with documentary evidence proving Eliza Jane's competence, most people who read the Little House books as children will defend Laura's version, because it is their version. It is part of their identity. Challenging Laura feels like challenging their own memories. This is not unique to Eliza Jane. Every historical figure who appears in popular literature faces this problem. The literary version becomes more real than the historical person. We know King Arthur through Mallory and Tennyson, not through historical sources, because historical sources barely confirm Arthur existed. We know Pocahontas through Disney, not through documentation. We know Billy the Kid through westerns, not through court records. But there is a difference. Arthur, Pocahontas, and Billy the Kid are famous. Their literary distortions are balanced, at least partially by scholarly attention. Historians write books correcting the mythology. Documentaries present alternative views. The general public may not absorb these corrections, but they exist. Eliza Jane is not famous. She's a minor character in someone else's story. No one writes biographies of minor characters. No documentaries correct the record for someone most people have never heard of. She exists in a liminal space, too visible to be completely forgotten, too minor to warrant serious historical recovery. And in that liminal space, Laura's caricature is the only version that circulates. The few historians who have tried to recover Eliza Jane's story face an uphill battle. They can point to Homestead records. They can note the successful land patent. They can observe that she taught multiple terms in multiple communities. But they cannot compete with the emotional power of a beloved children's book. They cannot make documentary evidence as compelling as narrative. They cannot undo generations of readers who laughed at Miss Wilder and absorbed the lesson that she was foolish. What is lost when one person's story is erased and replaced with a caricature? Not just historical accuracy, something deeper. The lesson that people are complex. That conflict has multiple perspectives. That the villains in our personal stories might be heroes in their own. That memory is unreliable. That beloved books can contain profound distortions. That we should question narratives, even narratives we love. These are lessons Americans need. We live in an era of contested histories, competing narratives, and bitter fights over whose story gets told. The Little House controversy is a microcosm. It shows how easily one version of events becomes dominant, how difficult it is to challenge beloved narratives, how personal grievances can masquerade as historical truth, and how silence, whether chosen or imposed, means losing the fight before it begins. Eliza Jane Wilder homesteaded alone in Dakota Territory during the 1880s. She broke sod, built shelter, planted crops, and proved up her claim. She taught school to survive. She persisted through drought, debt, and exhaustion. She was one of nearly 200,000 women who claimed land under the Homestead Act. She succeeded where 60% of homesteaders failed, and then she was erased from history and replaced with Miss Wilder, the foolish teacher who could not control a classroom. This is her story, the real one. The one that should have been told. But it comes 95 years too late to compete with the version Laura wrote. It reaches thousands, not millions. It corrects the record without changing the culture, and it serves, finally, as a reminder that history belongs to those who write it first, write it well, and write it for an audience ready to believe. But Eliza Jane was not the only Wilder sibling whose story was erased. She was not the only one whose life was complicated, difficult, and ultimately forgotten. There was another sister, younger than Eliza Jane, older than Almanzo, a woman who married, who struggled, who died young, and who left almost no trace in historical memory. Her name was Alice Wilder Baldwin. She lived from 1853 to 1892, and almost no one remembers her at all. What happened to the sister who disappeared from the family story entirely? That is a question worth asking, and the answer reveals something even darker about how families decide which stories matter and which lives are worth remembering.